discussing ocean acidification. But before we get into that, it's important to note that humanity's carbon footprint has increased dramatically within the last century due to the usage of fossil fuels in our daily lives. Utilizing these resources has caused high amounts of carbon to be absorbed by the ocean, which in turn has offset the ocean's pH levels. This offset has led to ocean acidification, which harms ocean ecosystems as well as its biodiversity. To further explore this topic, it is important to understand how humans have impacted the world's oceans. Large amounts of carbon dioxide are emitted into the atmosphere by different modes of transportation, such as planes, trains, cars, etc., through industrial output and other man-made fuel-burning sources. According to Ho Goldberg, approximately 25% of the CO2 emitted from all anthropogenic sources enters the ocean and creates carbonic acid. When the carbon from the atmosphere meets the ocean, it reacts with the seawater to form carbonic acid. If the molecules lose their hydrogen ions, then they will become bicarbonate, and if they dissociate another hydrogen ion, it will become carbonate. Carbonate then increases the acidity of the water, which impacts corals and other marine species. When seawater becomes more acidic, the calcification rates of coral reefs and coralline algae begin to decline, which in turn will dissolve and slow the growth rate of calcium carbonate on corals. In addition, marine organisms that have skeletons or shells made out of calcium carbonate or limestone also experience difficulties maintaining or producing their structures when the ocean is more acidic, since their growth is stunted and they are more prone to erosion. Ocean acidification can even impact society by causing the disruption of the food chain. Zooplankton are marine organisms that are at the bottom of the food chain after phytoplankton, and they are more vulnerable to erosion in higher acidity levels due to their exoskeleton, which is made out of calcium carbonate. And if they were to become endangered or extinct, it would cause the collapse of the food chain for marine organisms, and it would also disrupt the human food chain as well, since people rely on fish and other marine organisms for food. And essentially, what I'm trying to get at is that one of the most effective ways to reduce ocean acidification is simply by decreasing carbon emissions into the atmosphere in order to reduce the ocean's absorption of carbon dioxide.
Anthropogenic activity has notably influenced climate change as a result of constant and exponential resource use. We live in a consumer society, and increases in resource use directly correlate to that of the human population, so it is difficult to confront the problem of limiting our consumption. But it is necessary as we have a need for sustainability. Limiting our input can be the most positive output society can contribute to our ecosystem. Without an enforceable limit on resource consumption globally, resource use from mass production and/or commercial gain can cause an environmental deficit. Apart from abiotic and biotic raw materials, we use water, soil, air, biodiversity, and land as habitats and for recreational purposes. And for energy, we use wind power, solar power, and tidal flows. These resources also serve as emission sinks, waste dumps, and indispensable production factors for farming and forestry. As reported on the UBA in 2019, extraction and processing of non-regenerative raw materials are often energy-intensive activities involving large-scale interventions in ecosystems and the water balance, resulting in air, soil, and water pollution. Even the extraction and production of renewable resources often involve extensive use of energy, materials, chemicals, and in some cases water. And all this translates into pollution. For the use of products made of raw materials almost always results in greenhouse gas emissions, pollution, ecosystem damage, and/or biodiversity loss. Addressing this issue can hopefully contribute to enforceable global resource maintenance, keeping the environment sustainable.
A popular human activity that has been a contributing factor to human-caused climate change is the mass production of plastic. In the past few decades, leading on to today, there has been a total of 8.3 billion metric tons of plastic being produced. 91% of the plastic being used is not being recycled. This would bring an issue to the fact that since it does take a while for plastic to degrade, it takes a total of 400 years for plastic to degrade. And with the amounts that plastic is being produced, we won't see that in any part of our lifetimes. Because of this also leads to severe issues in respect to land and ocean life. When discussing the effects of plastic on land, we can see that much of the plastic isn't recycled. About only 12% of the plastic is incinerated. However, this does bring significant issues to many people who live near landfills. These toxins that are released greatly affect the health of many people, as well as to could possibly have health effects later in the future. The chemicals also that are released into besides the air, but released into the ground, are sometimes absorbed by the soils that could potentially harm water sources, such as lakes, rivers, and oceans. Then we come down to the effects in ocean life. So the amount of plastic that is found in oceans is known to many of us, if not all of us. The plastic that is found in oceans, the plastic accounts for close to 80% of the ocean debris. Not only does this include anything that's found in surface water, but anything that is found in deep sea levels. And we have seen that through the pictures of animals being entangled in plastic, or the seeing the deceased animals with the amounts of plastic inside of them because of consumption. The issue also I wanted to bring up is that the chemical components of plastic harms the ocean's pH level, making them more acidic, causing ocean acidification. As we've seen, the effects of ocean acidification, this increases, of course, the CO2 levels. We're seeing chain reactions because of the mass production of plastic. So altogether, we can see that plastic, being a human-caused activity, has been a great impact to our environments, whether they are here on inland or our oceans. Plastic has been an everyday use for many of us, that it feels almost as if there's no harm being done. However, this human activity has been a contributing factor to the climate change that is occurring today.
For this final part of the presentation, I will be discussing how human transportation use is contributing to climate change, and additionally how it is affecting us as a society. I'll go over a few key aspects, including motorized transportation, aviation transportation, and possible innovations for the future. So a quote to start us off. The driving force of climate is the sun. The spawning grounds of climate are the oceans. The mixing area is the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide appears to regulate the climate of the entire planet. The Earth's rotation and tilt create the seasons. Human health, behavior, productivity, and survival are all influenced by climate. The slightest changes in the oceans or atmosphere can produce undesirable imbalances and upsetting alterations in climate. So one key aspect of transportation that is affecting our climate dramatically is the use of fossil fuels. One example of this is motorized transportation, so our cars, motorcycles, buses, etc. These forms of transportation are over 95% dependent on oil and account for almost half of the world's oil use. And this number is continuously increasing as time goes on and our population continues to grow. Another aspect of motorized transportation is its tailpipe emissions, which emit multiple air pollutants into our environment, various oxides, hydrocarbons, particulate matter, and aromatics, all of which are flooding into the air in which we breathe and depend on for life. Additionally, the entire life cycle of the car has negative contributions. The creation of the materials, the movement of these materials from extraction point to the factories, and the destruction or breaking down of these materials. All of these aspects of motorized transportation accelerate our changing climate. So what about other forms of transportation? What about airplanes, for example? Well, this was even more alarming to learn about. Aviation is believed to have a greater effect on climate change than its carbon emissions alone. Additional contributors include nitrous oxides, soot, sulfate particles, and water vapor, which lead to the formation of contrails and cirrus clouds at altitude. It has been estimated that in certain heavy air traffic corridors, cloud cover has increased by as much as 20%. An increase in cloud amount changes the region's radiation balance. For example, solar energy reaching the surface may be reduced, resulting in surface cooling. They also reduce the terrestrial energy losses of the planet, resulting in warming. So aviation effects are long-lasting and extend through multiple layers of our Earth's spheres. A quick personal account I wanted to add to this is, before the COVID pandemic hit, a controversial conversation came up in a family get-together. My uncle, who's a non-believer in climate change, mind you, started to voice his beliefs on how he thinks climate change is a hoax, etc. And I eventually spoke up, as I couldn't bear to stay quiet in this moment. Tried to explain to him the truth of it all, and he responded by saying, well, why do you have so-called climate change believers going off in their fancy planes across the U.S. and other continents just to talk about this issue, when they themselves are polluting the air in this process? Seems contradicting. For a moment I paused, because admittingly he was right. Aviation truly does have a large impact on our ever-changing climate. So that brings me to my last point. What can we do about it? We must come up with efficient and economical ways of traveling. Currently, electric cars such as those from Tesla and improvements to railways are aiding our process of decreasing fossil fuel use in transportation, although expensive. There are various innovations on the rise but have yet to make their way into our economy. Things like self-driving drone taxis and magnetic levitation trains are upcoming improvements. Time is of the essence. It is hoped by many that we can come up with innovations prior to the point of no return for global warming. We must look within and do our part in making improvements to our own lives and lives of generations to come. A quote to end us off by Richard Vogel. Men, women, and children today marvel at machines, thrill at the power they have built into them, and ride and use machines incessantly as if mesmerized. Their lives are literally dominated by machines, but the power of a rocket, the deafening roar of a jet plane, the speed of a train, the enormity of a giant earth mover, the rough ride of a motorcycle, the precision of a computer, or the beauty of a complicated machine can never compare to the feelings generated by natural phenomena. Some of the experiences that machine slaves are missing that can stir the heart, brush the soul, and rustle dormant instincts in ways that machines can never engender include the eerie call of a loon, a red ball sunset seen in solitude, a fresh mountain meadow and melodious stream in spring, a flight of unerring geese, the hypnotic spell created by a blazing fire, a twilight rally of coyotes, the spell of a hazy fall afternoon in the country, viewing a sky full of stars interrupted by shooting stars, the smell of a damp swamp, the unexplainable restlessness at the onset of a snowstorm, an eagle soaring, the roll of a relentless surf, the smell of freshly burned ground and charred wood, a midnight display of northern lights, the feel of the first frost with frozen ground and impinging ice, walking the wild, the pre-dawn booming of prairie chickens, the north winds and tall pines, the chill, calmness, and darkness preceding a violent thunderstorm, an osprey plunging to water, a torrent waterfall, the searing heat and brightness of a summer desert, wild noises in the night, an impenetrable marsh thicket, walking on fresh snow, the loneliness of a deep woods, and ocean views alone, lightning after dark, the smell of the desert after a rain, and the anxiety feelings of finally going home. Machines must be put into perspective. They should not interfere with natural experiences. Rather, we should allow nature to pour into our souls to help fill the emptiness that is otherwise there to haunt us.